My name is Paul Arney, and I'm the owner brewer at the Ale Apothecary. So my brewing days started in the early 90s. Basically worked at two different breweries, the startup DESCHUTES at the production facility, and then a little bit older, more mature DESCHUTES brewery under Larry Sador. After running R&D and running the pub for a while, I got the idea of how breweries receive things and put things out and how you make your customers happy, all that stuff. In May of 2011, took the plunge to start my own thing, which ended up being this Ale Apothecary. Very, very small, so far very rewarding. Having this business and taking this plunge, my latent artist inside is really getting satisfied, which is awesome. Really trying to define what handmade means. For me, I just need to define what that word means to me. Old world methods and principles and kind of the concept of the pre-industrial revolution brewery, only from the aspect where brewers for thousands of years would make their equipment. They would know what they needed to do, but they didn't have places that were manufacturing brewing equipment, so they had to do it themselves. And what that lends to is house flavor. So I'm really trying to get as much house flavor as I can out of the brewery, giving it a sense of place. So we use things like a 200-year-old spruce tree that we cut down on the property for a lauter ton. Black currants grow by the river, put those in a batch of beer every year, and it's very limited. It's only one oak barrel's worth. As far as differentiating from other beers, I guess you can start with the packaging. Our beer only comes in bottles. It only is packaged in champagne bottles with a cork and this really nifty little champagne knot hand tie. For a couple of reasons. The hand tie kind of signifies this tie to the old world methods. Sometimes we leave things behind that don't always need to be left behind. The beer, because we package it only in champagne bottles because the CO2 volumes are extremely high for that, for beer. It's about 5 volumes of CO2, very sparkly. And we package the beer with Brettanomyces in the bottle. And that's also something a lot of breweries don't entertain. This whole brewery is designed to not only bring in Brett, but everything that comes in through the window and that blows around the air up here. And say what makes our brewery different than others is this place. It's my family, and it's the desire to brew beer with handmade equipment. My customer is a real interesting person. What I didn't realize was how fascinated this culture is on the vast array of exploration that's going on with beer. They really enjoy what they're doing and what they're drinking. This whole thing with people trading beer and getting beer that is hard to get and sharing that with friends. That's one of the core concepts of our beer. I've never heard anybody, like when I tell them I'm trying to brew out a style, be like, oh my gosh, I'm not having your beer. That's almost even more excitement. It's like, oh wow, what do I think it is and what would I call it? Generally speaking, what I'm finding is brewers are always willing to help out. Like if I'm in need, like right now I've got my raw materials and glassware being stored at Good Life. I've got a couple rye barrels at 10 Barrels storing for me. I've had offers for people to take my beer over the mountain. People are always willing to help out. But when it comes to like say actual beers, it is that's I guess where me personally I feel competition is when you've got a customer who's had something that's when they're drinking maybe one of my beers and it reminds them of something. That's when my competition hackles go up. It's like that shouldn't taste like anything else. You know what I mean? But generally it's not competition as much as collaboration. I'm not after collaborating on beers like a lot of breweries are out there doing now. The collaborations I'm looking for are a little bit different than that. We have this spruce log, for example. Well, there's a lot of things you can do with spruce. You could make a guitar out of it. You could make a paddleboard out of it, and then you could have this brewing vessel and this beer and this thing that all come from the same tree. Those are the kind of the collaborations that I want to work on. I'm too particular about my methods and just being weird to like. I've worked with other people for a long time, and it's really rewarding to work by myself. With the idea of I wanted to build a oak barrel brewery. The mash tun is an oak barrel. My open fermenters are oak barrels. My settling barrels are oak barrels. I dry hop in oak barrels. Condition. I try to do everything possible in wood. Wood, unlike stainless steel, has pores in it. And especially if I'm using bacteria and yeast from the air, and I really am intent about creating these little ecosystems in each barrel, wood is the place to do it because these critters will take up lodging in there. The main concept is to have a place for these guys to reside and live and participate in the fermentations and the aging and the maturation of the beer as it moves through the brewery. I'm going to mash in tonight. Mash up in an oak barrel and then wrap the barrel up in blankets, keep it nice and warm, and the mash stays in there for about 12 hours. I will put the mash into the lauter tun that's made of the spruce barrel or the spruce tree lauter tun, and go from there. Wort runs into the brew kettle where I boil it for about an hour and a half, and I'll add 1 round of hops and some sour wort. I only use 1 hop. I use a Cascade hop grown by the Goshi family. Signing up with the farmer as opposed to signing up for aromatic properties or bittering properties, I'm going to get fluctuations in that crop each year. Knock out into an oak barrel overnight where hot and cold break will settle out. And next day, I'll draw the wort off the top of that into my open fermenters and harvest the yeast from previous ferment from the week before. Primary fermentation lasts about 7 to 10 days. And then it gets transferred into some bigger barrels made over in McMinnville by Oregon Barrel Works. They're puncheons, and I can put more than 1 batch of beer in those. So as primary fermentation tapers off and the CO2 production from that open fermentation is kind of at this point where it's at risk from maybe some non-desirable bacteria, I move it into these bigger barrels where the loss is less because the foaming has died down. CO2 production has died down as well. Primary can finish out in these big barrels, and then they'll sit in there for 2 to 4 weeks, and then they get transferred to my cellar barrels where I'll age them for, depending on the beer, 3 months to a year, year and a half. They'll sit there, and all the wild yeast in the barrels and the other little critters in there will continue to mature the beer and evolve it. And when it's ready to get bottled, we'll put it in another oak barrel that has a port in it, and I can put dry hops in it, and the beer sits on dry hops for about a month. From that stage, from that dry hop barrel, I'll filter it really coarsely just to kind of knock down the bacterial load, re-inoculate some of our house yeast blend in there for bottling, add some sugar in the form of our sourwort, run it into the champagne bottles. And this is a very big difference than most breweries. We fill bottles still, but the sugar and the yeast in the bottle will carbonate it up from about less than a volume up to over 5 volumes of CO2. And then it stays in the bottles for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they go out to the public. The brewery is designed to have an output of about 500 cases a year. Because it's so small, I've kind of adopted some winemaking practices and terminology, and it seemed more apt for me to talk in cases rather than barrels. My goal is to stay at 500 cases and really kind of get systems in place and grow incrementally. The more people I talk to when I talk finances, it's if you can do it by yourself, it's worth it in the long run. And especially with a concept as kind of odd and personal as this one, I think that's just going to be essential to the brand. Retail and marketing and branding and all that stuff, it starts with it really starts with the competition. The hardest thing I had to do was set a price point on the beer. I want people to drink my beer. I am not a wealthy person, and I don't go out and spend $26 on a bottle of beer or wine very often. It's very rare. It does happen. But then again, that is the product that I'm trying to make. It's not an everyday product. It's a very special product. And so to support that, the methods of the brewing process, the flavor of the beer, and then the way the packaging looks, all contribute to that experience. What I've done is, like the bottle costs is is just ridiculously high because I'm using champagne bottles that can withstand, 7 volumes of CO2. My labels are very expensive because I want to make sure that when the customer holds the bottle, that it supports, it's the right fit. The hand tying of the knots, having a firm hold on certain costs is great. But there's so many unknown costs for me in this brewery because it's so vastly different than anything I've done before. This is how we got here, and these are the things that we like, these are the things that worked, and these are the things that didn't. Well, our marketing strategy has been to get people into the brewery. That was last year. So last year when the brewery opened up, I would do these open door things with the brewery where people could come up. I could sell beer directly to them, and then they could go and tell their friends. That was, we really want to be word of mouth. Our marketing has been very inexpensive because other people are doing it for us. They have this great experience, they tell their friends, and then there's places they know where they can get it. We started the brewery trying to raise money for our various operations by incorporating an ale club. Much like wine clubs, where people will front a certain amount of money and get wine or beer throughout the year. And so a customer leaves knowing something specific and tangible, and the shop owner gets to communicate whatever it is that's important to the customer. It's something that doesn't happen very much anymore, with online sales and the bigger. And so that was a very important thing with this brewery. The brewery is limited by the land that we're on, for sure. So this brewery I've tried to create as sustainable as possible. We have this land that we're limited to. The brewery is limited in size. There's so many limitations on it. I don't want people coming and going all the time. I don't want to have employees out there. It's constricted in a lot of ways. That's not so good for business growth and all that, but going back to what I was saying about what we want out of life and all that, I think it's really good for that. It's very difficult sometimes, but I think it's really good. It's not off the table where this maybe is just the way that we identify who we are as a brand, and maybe the brewery ends up going away someday. Right now, what I'm thinking about doing is turning the existing entire brewery into just the brew house, where all the fermentations happen. I get to brew beer, but once it gets into the aging barrels, we take it to another location where we can age the barrels and bottle and do all that stuff on a sewer system, and separate those two entities. But we're still brainstorming.